Well, first of all, there's no profile of an active shooter. I can tell you that right off the bat. Most of those things start out as a grievance. There's a pathway to violence, and that pathway to violence is across all violent crime. And it starts as a grievance, and we're not getting into a whole lot of detail. It starts as a grievance, moves into an ideation, then it moves into some research, and then they start preparing. Then they do that. Then they go to the point where it's the breach. Just before, that's usually the point of no return, and then they have the attack phase.
Welcome to the Cops and Writers Podcast. Your host, Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell, worked the streets in one of the nation's largest police departments for over 25 years. Ride along with O'Donnell and his expert guests as they help you navigate the oftentimes confusing and misunderstood world of law enforcement. O'Donnell and his guests on this show do not represent any law enforcement agency. The content of this show is not meant to be legal advice. If you think you need a lawyer, you probably do.
Hey, Cops and Writers, thanks for being here with us today for another episode of the Cops and Writers Podcast. I'm Patrick O'Donnell, and I'll be your host for today's show. This show is listener-supported, so thanks to all of you who keep the show going. I would especially like to thank those of you who are patrons of the show. Your generosity helps pay for the software, equipment, and my time producing this show. Yes, you too can become a patron for less than a cup of coffee or a pint of Guinness. Just go over to patreon.com/Cops and Writers. Welcome, everyone, to part one of my interview with retired FBI Special Agent, author, and Professor Raymond Carr. The conclusion of this interview will air next Sunday. When we think of bank robberies, it conjures up visions of iconic movies like Dog Day Afternoon, Heat, and, of course, Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze battling it out in Point Break. My guest on the show today, retired FBI Special Agent Raymond Carr, hunted down hundreds of real bank robbers, including the most prolific bank robber of all time, who was known as the Friday Night Bank Robber, Carl Gugasian. Carl evaded capture for 30 years before Ray was on the case. Carl is believed to have been involved in over 50 robberies before Ray ultimately arrested him. A little about Ray. Dr. Raymond Carr is a retired 26-year veteran of the FBI, and during his career was responsible for investigations into a wide array of criminal behavior to include, but not limited to, drugs, terrorism, public corruption, violent, and white-collar crimes. Dr. Carr is currently an associate professor at Wilmington University and the director of the Wilmington University Criminal Justice Institute. Please enjoy this fascinating conversation with the FBI agent who caught the bank robber who was on the run for over 30 years and brought him to justice. Ray Carr, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Pat. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I wanted to start out with how I start out most of my podcasts, where it all began. How would you describe your childhood?
Well, I was an Army brat.
Okay.
My father was in the military, so we did a lot of traveling. I spent some time in Germany, spent some time in other countries, in other states. So I had a chance to see the world even before I had a chance to see the world.
So where were you born? Stateside or overseas?
No, I was born in Panama, in the Panama Canal Zone.
Oh, wow. Cool. So
Yeah.
how many foreign countries did you live in?
Well, lived in 1, 2, 3, 5.
Wow. That's when you were a youngster?
When I was younger, yeah. I don't remember Panama as much.
Sure.
It kind of was a scary time for me in Panama as I contacted spinal meningitis.
Oh, gee. Okay.
As a 6-month-old baby. And they thought that it was going to leave me with a problem later on in life.
Yeah.
They wound up calling me the miracle baby. The medical doctors at Gugasian Hospital in Panama really did an outstanding job. And thanks to my mom, she's the one that notices something wasn't right.
Oh, okay.
Called a surgeon in on a weekend who was very upset until he examined me. And then he apologized to my mother.
Wow. How do they treat that even? Or how did they treat that back then? Do you remember? I mean, you wouldn't remember being treated, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there was antibiotics. I know that My mom talked about spinal taps and
Mm.
how painful they are.
Oh
And
yeah.
of course, I don't remember any of that either. But I, whatever, it just, the only thing it left me with is when I was younger, I used to have a speech impediment. I used to stutter,
Oh
and I grew out of it.
wow.
Thank, thank, goodness. Thank God for that.
I'll be darned. So where did you go to like grammar in high school?
I started out in South Philadelphia, going to kindergarten, and then we went over to Germany, and I went to a school in Germany, which was a school where we had and we were taught both English and German
Oh
as
wow.
languages. So it's amazing what they do in foreign countries with English. Is English is almost a second language in every country
Yeah.
that you visit, and in most schools they teach English, but they also teach the language of the land. And we were in a military school over there, and then we came back and we were in Staten Island, New York. My father was stationed in Fort Wadsworth, which is right up in Staten Island, and he then got deployed to Vietnam. And we went back to my grandparents' house in South Philadelphia, and I did 2 years there. And then when he came back from Vietnam, we bought a house in New Jersey. And I did my high school years in New Jersey.
So did you go all 4 years in at the same high school?
All 4 years at the same high school,
Oh,
and then all
that's good.
4 years at the same college.
Oh, that's awesome. I've talked to and I've known people that, they've gone to like three different high schools, in 4 years or something like that. That's tough.
It is.
That's super tough. Now, your father, he was in the army. Did he make that a career?
He did. He spent 23 years in, and he
Okay.
retired in 1972. He re-
Okay.
and I remember living in Germany, and my mother told me later. She said that my father had got called because they were there and they thought they were going to be attacked by Russia. And there was a certain plan, and she had four children. One was just a baby, was my younger brother. I was
Yeah.
7. He was a baby. And we were going to have to flee in a car and go into Hungary
Oh my
and
gosh.
find a different way to get out. But my mom was all set. So they were a special breed of people back then. They really, really were. They really were something else.
Wow. I couldn't even imagine with little kids and stuff like that. Oh God. But yeah, I'm imagining that's the Cold War, like in the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
that was in the 60s.
oh, six. Oh, gee. Yeah, yeah, 60s, 60s. Yeah, that's when we thought, people are, digging out bomb shelters in their backyards and,
Mhm.
that was, you think about it, the blockade for Cuba, the missile crisis in Cuba, that those were very tense times.
I remember my father and mother taking us to Dachau. Dachau was a
Oh,
concentration camp.
yes.
And I remember the museum they had there of human skulls as ashtrays,
Oh,
human hair as lampshades. And I got a chance to see at 7, 8 years old the ovens where a lot of Jewish people were exterminated,
yes.
for lack of a better term. And my father, I mean, they have the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which I've never been to. And people say, well, why don't you go? And I said, I saw the real thing. I don't need to go to the museum.
Yeah.
And I'll never, ever forget walking through there. It had a lasting impact on me, even as a 7, 8 year old boy.
Wow. I mean, this is totally off topic, but yeah, I was just finished watching World War II in color. I think it was on Netflix or something like that. And, of course, they touched on, the concentration camps. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder how many kids, are they teaching this in schools today? I hope so.
I hope so too. You got to remember where you came from.
Yes,
Otherwise, you're destined to repeat it.
absolutely. Yes. We live in very comfortable times right now. This is very, very comfortable living. There isn't ration books. There isn't, like
Mm.
blatant, oh, you're a Jew. Yeah, you're gonna be on this train off to the concentration camp. People whine and complain and bitch about this, that, and the other thing. And yes, can we always do better? Of course we can. But, we're living the high life right now.
That we are. That we are.
Yeah, people don't realize how bad it used to be. So yeah, in
You're
in
one of those guys
contrast.
who used to walk to school in the snow uphill, right?
Yes, both ways with no shoes. Yeah.
There you go.
But I am in Wisconsin right now, and it is -2 for the high today, and it's -30 with the wind. And I was out there snow blowing and shoveling, and I'm just like for about a half hour, and I'm like, I did this for 25 years. I was outside as a cop in this for 20. How did I do this? I don't get it. What's the craziest thing you saw when you were a cop? My first week on the job, a guy running at me with a butcher knife. He just killed his brother over the last hot dog. That's chapter 1. There are 33 more. Police Stories, The Rookie Years just launched. Available now on Amazon. Search Police Stories Patrick O'Donnell or click the link in the show notes. Back to the show.
We were built to serve.
Yeah.
That's the only way I look at it, because I did it too, but of course I didn't deal with the cold you deal with. I mean, we had 6 inches the last 2 days, 6, 7 inches. So I was out shoveling snow out of my driveway, snow blowing it. I
Yeah.
don't shovel anymore. I try not to anyways.
Yeah.
Uh, it's tomorrow we're supposed to have an Arctic blast. It's
Yep.
going to be like 2 degrees here.
Oh man, that's just craziness. So your father, he was in the army and he served in Korea and Vietnam, correct?
That is correct.
Now, was he infantry or what was his MOS?
He's infantry.
Okay.
He wound up as a commanding sergeant major.
Oh, that's huge.
When he was in Korea, he was wounded. He got the Purple Heart, and he got the Bronze Star in Vietnam. And
Wow.
the funny thing is, I'll tell you the story because I think it's pretty incredible. Is they were on a hill, and my dad, he really didn't tell me, but my mom told me because he would tell her, but he never told us.
Right.
And he said, you're on a hill, and you could see a hill where you have another squad that are fighting the Chinese and the Koreans, and you see them getting slaughtered, and there's not a thing you can do because they're too far away to be able to support.
Right.
And the same thing happened to them. He got hit in the back, and he laid on the ground, for 5 hours,
Oh.
and just waiting for someone to come and help him. And he couldn't move his legs. He was paralyzed from the waist down.
Wow.
And he said, told my mom, he says, I prayed to God and said, if you save me, I'll say the rosary every day. And a medic finally showed up. You know what his name was? Jesus.
I saw that, yeah.
Which to me was extremely incredible. And then something you don't know, that later on in high school, I applied and got nominated for West Point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had to go to a prep school in Rhode Island. But in order to go to the prep school, I was talking to my father and had uncles, and they were all military. And I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to go into the military. And my father and my uncles, one Saturday, sitting down in our family room, my parents' home, talked me out of it.
Oh, wow. How did they do that? What did they say?
They said, if you do this, you're going to give up to 5 years, 1 and then 4, and then you're going to give up another 4, and they're probably going to get you to re-enlist. He goes, that's 9 years. He goes, you're 18 years old now. He said, by the time you get your life back, you're 28.
Wow.
To me, I said, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. That's half of my life. So I went to Kutztown, but my father passed pretty young at 56 from cancer. I think had something to do with Vietnam. And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, you always wanted me to go to West Point. Why did Dad talk me out of it? And she said, I asked him the same thing. And he said, you know what? He said, I fought in 2 wars, so he wouldn't have to.
Mm.
And that really sat with me. And I thought, wow, there's no greater love than that.
Yeah, you got that right. And that probably kind of was the roots for, you want to be of service.
Yeah.
Your dad was of service to this country. and your mom was of service to you guys. She was the support. With four kids, that's no easy task because your dad's off fighting in wars and doing this and that. And he was a command sergeant major. That's a hell of a lot of responsibility. That's a huge rank for enlisted. I think that's the highest you could go, pretty much.
Yeah, usually 9 is the highest you can go. So,
Yeah, they get a ton of respect. My son was in the army. He did 9 years in the army, and I of course I worked with a slew of guys that were in the military. And there isn't many command sergeant majors running around, so
you know,
that's quite the accomplishment. That's something else. So, you know, what were some of the other influences you think that got you into law enforcement?
a lot of my relatives, uncles, older cousins, were all cops.
Okay.
My uncle, his name was Jimmy O'Hara, James O'Hara. They called him Scotty. He was because he was from Scotland, so that's why they called him Scotty.
Okay.
He was a detective with Philadelphia Police Department, and there were other guys that were also with the Philadelphia Police Department. And most of my family being from Philadelphia, I went, this is what I want to do. And I remember as a young kid watching TV, and one of my favorite shows was the FBI with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Yes, yes.
And we tell my grandfather when my father was in Vietnam, I said, I'm 9 years old, 10 years old. And I said, hey, this is what I want to do. And I knew then early on that I wanted to be in law enforcement. And everything I did from that point was geared toward going into law enforcement.
Now, your uncles and cousins that were cops in Philly, were most of them military veterans as well?
My uncle was Navy, and a lot of the other ones also did a short stint, 2, 3, 4 years within the military before joining on to the Philadelphia Police Department.
Yeah, that was pretty normal. Like I
Mm-hmm.
started on the job in '95, and there were still Vietnam vets that were pounding the pavement, working the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't unusual to be working with somebody that had time in the military or at least were reserves. It was a natural progression, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So, you are in high school. Did you go straight to college right after high school?
I did. I went straight to
Okay.
college on a partial, a little bit of money there for playing football in college.
Where'd you
Uh,
go?
I went to Kutztown University. They
Never heard
were
of it.
they were in the semifinals this year
Oh, cool. Okay.
for Division 2. So it
Oh, all right.
wasn't Division 1 school. It was at the time it was Division 3. There was only 3 divisions back then. There
Okay.
wasn't 4 divisions like there are now.
Yeah.
And we played schools like Bucknell, Lehigh. Some of the teams in our conference would play University of Delaware. But Delaware and all those schools were Division 2, and we were back
Hmm.
for it. We did play University of Pennsylvania
Oh,
one
okay.
year when I was there. So, give you an idea.
Okay. So you're in college. Were you working when you were going to college?
I was. I had a job on campus. My first job on campus, because I was a football player, was security
Okay.
at the gymnasium. And my job was to make sure nobody stole the gym. And I got paid
Okay.
for that. And then I
Okay.
wound up getting a real job where I ran the intramural department for the university. The head football coach kind of took care of that, and he actually really took care of me very well with that.
So the football coach was not just a coach, but a mentor, do you think?
He was. His name was George Baldwin. He was a former Marine.
Okay.
So everything we did on the field was regimented.
I can only imagine.
I really, really thought.
That's awesome. Well, you learn discipline and you learn, a lot of good stuff, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I'm sure. So you became when you graduated from college, were you already applying to the FBI or yeah, I know you were a juvenile counselor for some time. Where did that come into play?
Well, believe it or not, when I was a junior in junior college, myself and an offensive tackle, we went and took the exam for the New Jersey State Police.
Okay.
We both passed, and we were going to the interview. We did it in April, May, And by the time they got back to us, it was August, and they wanted us to come for an interview and a physical.
Yeah.
And, we were 20 years old, 21 years old at the time, which was about the right age for a lot of guys that were going into the New Jersey State Police. So I had a lot of high school friends that wound up becoming troopers.
Yeah.
And I called and I said, I'd really like to finish, as did my teammate. We really like to finish our last year of school and graduate.
Sure.
I mean, we did 3 years, and I had another year of football. And they said you'd have to start the process all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said, okay. So I said, then I'll start the process all over. And then just as I left, before I got the job at Glen Mills Schools, I took the exam for the Pennsylvania State Police, and I got put in a band, and I never got called
Okay.
to go with the Pennsylvania State Police. I mean, it was the simplest test I ever took, but I think there was a lot of quotas they were doing at that time. This
Sure.
was like 1978.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
79. There's a lot of quotas they were doing at that time, and I was not a veteran, so that didn't help me as well, because veterans got 10 points,
Sure.
so you kind of knock down a little bit. So I had no idea what I was going to do, and Coach calls me up to the office, as he always does, taking care of me. He said, "I want you to meet two gentlemen. They work at a school for young boys." I go, "Okay," and they tell me about this place, Glen Mills, which is a school for adjudicated delinquents. It's the oldest school of its kind in the country, from 1826.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm kind of impressed with it. And I go down for an interview, and I get hired. They hire me. And I start working. And I started out as a 4 to 12 counselor. After 6 months, I moved to the AM counselor position. And then I became a supervisor 6 months later. And then I wound up running a unit, and then became the director of personnel
Oh, wow.
for the whole facility.
How old were you when you were doing all this?
I was between the ages of 22 and 28, 29 before I left.
Wow. That's good experience, though. How do you think that prepared you for your future in law enforcement?
I think it prepared me. The thing that prepared me the most for was learning how to communicate with people, because that's what law enforcement is. It's the ability to communicate and gather information that makes your job easier, and how you talk to people. And that really, because I'm dealing with juvenile delinquents, everything they're doing, they're lying to me, they're trying to get over. So they taught me so much to be able to read body language and all these different things that really did me well when I went into the FBI.
Oh, I'm sure. So when did you start applying for the FBI, and how long did it take you to get on?
I got married in 82.
Okay.
And in 1984, we had my first child, my daughter, and I applied to the FBI. I had to go down and take a written test, and I went down and I took it down in Philadelphia, and I didn't pass. I had my undergrad degree, I had a master's degree, and I went, man, it's not that I didn't pass, but I didn't score high enough
Okay.
to the next phase. And they were looking for accountants. So what do? I went back to school, and I started my accounting degree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm 3 years in this. I'm 6 credits away from getting my accounting degree. And this professor, he starts talking to me, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing this for? You already have 2 degrees. Why are you doing this?" I said, "Well, I want to get in the FBI." And he goes, "Why don't you go and get your MBA? They'll take you in a minute with that." And I said, okay. So I went and I got my MBA. And I picked it up just as I went into the bureau. And so I had almost 4 degrees. I was 6 credits short of an accounting degree.
Oh,
but
my
I had
gosh.
an MBA, and the bureau took me. And it's funny, but I went in diversified. So they have all these different programs you can go in. And I went in diversified. And so in other words, I was like everybody else. So a lot of diversified agents were former police officers. You had a lot of those guys. Then you had your engineers, your doctors, your scientists, all those different types of people.
Sure.
But the thing with me is that they called me and they said, hey, would you be willing to take the accounting exam? And I said, well, am I not in? What's this situation? Oh, no, you're good, but it will just open up another spot. And I said, look, I don't want to I have no problem working those kind of cases, but I don't want to be, pigeonholed that's the only thing I can do. And they said, okay, fine. We just thought we'd ask. And I wound up going in, diversified. And I wound up going to the FBI Academy in April 1989.
Wow. I went to college at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and I graduated in 88. And I remember, they have career fairs. My major was sociology, my minor was criminal justice, and they didn't have a criminal justice major. So, that's as close as I could come. And I went to the FBI tent. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. It's like, that sounds like a good job. And, I go up there and they're like, what's your degree going to be in? I said, sociology, minor in criminal justice. We're not interested in you. And I'm like, what? And they said, we want accountants and lawyers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that popped the balloon really fast. So I never even thought about it again. I'm like, oh, well, that's out the window. I'll just go local.
That's why I went back to school, to get those degrees, because I knew that's what they were looking for.
Wow. So, I mean, you had a interest in the FBI, as a kid and all that. Why do you think you were still so laser focused on the FBI and maybe not some other Fed job?
They were the best. The FBI was the best. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go and I'm going to be with the best.
Okay.
And that's what I did.
So, what'd your wife say? You've already got one kid, you've got a steady job, and all that good stuff. I don't know what it paid, but probably was decent.
It was okay.
Yeah.
But I had two children at the time. I had
okay.
my son. So I had two children. And I got to tell you, they say this, and it's true. Behind every man that is successful in what they do, there's a good woman.
Oh, all day long.
I'm telling you, my wife is the best. She supported me in everything I've ever done, and she still supports me to this day. So, she just says, I got your back. I'll go wherever you go. And I thought, wow, with that kind of support and that kind of love, I was set.
Yeah, that's huge. I've got two sons and I've got a stepson and a stepdaughter. And I always told, my kids, it's like, be careful who you hook up with. Be careful who you marry. Be careful, whatever your relationships are. They can either elevate you or drag you down to the mud.
Absolutely.
So, okay, kids, that's my word of advice for you for your dating and marriage, whatever.
I'll tell you, this is my advice to my daughters. I said, never marry a man and expect him to take care of you. Always be in a position to take care of yourself. Never
Absolutely
do that.
Yep. That's awesome advice. Awesome advice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you take the test for the FBI, you get in. What was your academy experience?
I felt like I was in a gerbil cage.
Okay.
It's a building where there's windows and all that stuff, but you don't get outside too much. I mean, the training's intense, academically, physically, defensive tactics wise, shooting. There's not a whole lot of downtime. For the first 8 weeks, I was not allowed to go home.
Oh my gosh. You were wearing to have kids.
I had kids. Oh yeah. I could not leave campus. I could not leave the academy grounds.
Could they visit you?
They could come up and visit me, which they did. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Northern Virginia, Nova, as they call it, Northern Virginia. And they stayed there, and I would go up, but I had to be in by midnight. I had a curfew. Even my whole time at the academy, I had a curfew until the last night.
Oh my gosh.
The experience itself, I said, how did I get this? How did I wind up here? I was so blessed and so fortunate, because I'm looking at some of my classmates, and not all of us made it. I think we had 46 and only 42 made it through. Four were cut for different reasons.
Okay.
And but the quality of the people in the academy, second to none.
Okay.
Second to none.
Oh, that's great. So was the FBI what you thought it would be? Like, okay, you go through all your training. The academy is what, about 6 months, 8 months?
Actually, it was 14 weeks, which is
14.
not very long when you
No,
think.
it's not.
But that was back in the 80s. Today, it's 26 weeks, which
Okay.
they've added a lot to it. They've added a lot to the training, ethics, evoc training,
Sure.
a lot of other things they add to it.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
That totally makes sense. So, wow. Okay. So you do 14 weeks. Then what was your first assignment?
My first assignment was Buffalo, and that's kind of funny when you say that. What's your first assignment? Because in week 8, um, my wife's waiting for a phone call to find out where I go because they had this meeting uh, in week 8 at 7 o'clock at night, and everybody gets to pull their orders.
Okay.
Right? So everybody's saying, "Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go?" And I'm thinking, at the time, it's a savings and loan crisis that's going on, and they're really sending a lot of agents to the Southwest, New Mexico, Texas, all the way down in those areas, Arizona, because it was a big problem with savings and loans and bank
Okay.
failures. And I had the background, the MBA and the finance and the accounting, and I thought, just because I came in diversified, they're still going to put me where I go. So
Sure, sure.
I'm thinking that's where I'm going. And so I'm sitting there and we're going up, and my roommate was an accountant. So he gets this thing, he winds up in San Antonio. I said, "Oh boy."
Here we
So,
go.
and I'm next after him. So I go up and I pull up my orders and I open it up and it says Buffalo. And I said, "Where the hell is Buffalo?" I had no idea where Buffalo was. I was so focused on the Southwest. And then I had to put a pin on a big map that I was in Buffalo, New York. And I'm thinking, how the heck did I wind up here? And it's just one of those things. And but what a great office to be in for the first office. Really a great
Okay.
office.
Did they give you any choice? Did you have like a wish list or anything like that?
What they do is they send out a list of the top of the Big Ten.
Okay.
Like we have the Big Ten now, it's like the Big 12, where you would put where you want to go.
Yeah.
Now they provide you a list where they provide all 56 field offices. And of course, Philadelphia was number one. I didn't want to go to New York because I had 2 kids. I thought, and they were complaining. Agents in New York, some agents in New York were on food stamps.
Oh, I was just gonna say the cost of living is
It
insane.
was unbelievable.
Yeah.
LA. So I didn't want any of those places. And I'm thinking, where am I going to wind up at? So where I wound up in Buffalo, it was still a struggle. And I'll tell you, we got there, we bought a house. And I remember the mortgage on the house was $930 a month.
Yeah.
But my paycheck every 2 weeks was only $890.
Oh,
At two
oh,
kids,
ouch.
I'm thinking, I'm going, how the hell am I going to do this? So he had 2 cars. I sold one until we were able to, my salary was able to catch up with the
Yeah.
time after a couple of years. But it was tough in the beginning, but I still didn't regret it one bit. And it was still more than I was making
Sure.
than when I was at Glen Mills.
Wow. So you are in Buffalo. Now, when you're a brand new agent like that, what kind of cases did they throw your way, or what did the training look like? Because there probably wasn't like a formal field training like on a city police department.
Well, I did have a field training officer,
You
right?
did? Okay.
I did have, as you call them, FTOs. I
Yes.
had a training agent. And for 2 years, I'm on a probationary plan.
Oh, that's a
And
long time.
yeah,
Holy
for that
cow.
2 year period. Yeah, I got to fill out all these things. I got to make sure I testify in a grand jury, testify in a hearing. I got to do an affidavit. I got to do I got to do all these different things
Yeah.
to make sure that I'm well rounded. But the first thing they do is they put me on a bank robbery squad.
Cool.
And it's really a violent crime squad because in Buffalo, that squad worked bank robberies, fugitives, international transportation of stolen motor vehicles, international transportation of stolen property, all these different things. But anything that was violent crime. Then you had the drug squad, you had an FCI squad, and you had an organized crime squad. All
Okay.
these different things that were there. And I'm there, and what they do is they give us and they say, we're going to teach you how to do the paperwork. You're going to start doing background investigations, what we call applicant work.
Yeah.
And you probably remember that stuff, Pat. And so I start doing these backgrounds. So I get one, I have to go interview the defensive line coach for the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, wow. Is that cool?
Right. And the Buffalo was doing really well at that time.
Okay.
So I go, and it just so happens that one of my wasn't a teammate of mine, but I knew him, Andre Reeves.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Was a wide receiver. And I remember, so I go there and I talk to this guy, Ted Cottrell, who's a defensive line coach. And I knew him because when I was at Glen Mills, I was coaching. He was coaching at Chester High School.
Mm.
So we kind of knew each other, but didn't know each other.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked, and I said, hey, is Andre around? He says, yeah, he's probably up in his room. I says, tell him the FBI is here to see him. So he comes down. He don't know what's going on. I have my back to him. I'm around the corner, and he comes around. I say, yo, Dre, how you doing? And he says, Ray, how are you? I says, yeah, I'm the FBI. He goes, get out. So we started talking. We would get together from time to time, and I start working out at the Buffalo Bills complex.
Oh, is that cool? Holy cow.
And one day I'm sitting in there, and I'm in there, and we just finished working out. I got a shower. I'm sitting down, and I'm right in front of Jim Kelly's locker, right? And he's got these beautiful girls in his locker.
Sure.
So Andre's across from him, and I says, hey, does he know all these girls? And all of a sudden, over my back shoulder, he says, yeah, I know that one. I was with her last night. I start laughing, and then they signed a ball that both him and Jim Kelly signed the ball, and he came over my house and gave it to Ray, my younger son. And
is that cool?
Ball, which is nice. They're both Hall of Famers. So imagine having a ball signed by two Hall of Famers.
Oh, that's awesome.
The money. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's great. So you're in Buffalo, doing your thing there. Was it what you thought it would be, or was it different?
It is what you make it. I could go in and do nothing, and probably they're not going to say a word, or I can go in and make a statement, and that's what I did. I went in, and within 8 months, I was up on a Title III, which is a wire. We were up on telephones, and I was up on a Meister where we put microphones into a facility. And people go, you're still on probation. How are you doing this? And I just had a great support team around me, and me and another first office agent. We ran this case, wound up locking up a bunch of people, tied all the way up to the mayor of Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
And it tied into some cops, too. It had to do with a junkyard, auto parts. And they were transported between Canada and Pittsburgh and Erie.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of things going on with that. Pretty neat.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually. Damn. So when did you first get attracted to investigating criminal behavior, or sometimes it's called profiling?
When I was in the FBI Academy.
Oh, really? That early?
Yeah. And we had someone from behavioral science unit come in. His name was Brantley. And he came in and he started talking to us about behavioral science. And I wound up becoming friends with him later on. But I'm sitting there in the classroom, and I was right in the front row because Carr, you're right in the front row.
Yeah, sure.
I went, this is me. This is what I want to do. I didn't know how to get there, but I knew that that's one of the things I wanted to do in the FBI.
What do you think drew you towards it?
Just I was always a big guy into behavior.
Okay.
I always loved reading people and looking into things. I'm always a big puzzle guy. I love puzzles. I love to, to be able to solve things and look at things differently, how people think. And that's what this was. Looking at how people do things.
Interesting. So what does TV and movies get wrong about profiling or, criminal behavior?
A lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we don't have unlimited time, so one of the things that really jump out at you, you're just like, oh, come on, please.
Yeah, I mean, look, Criminal Minds. Okay, I had two buddies from the unit that were writers, or kind of making sure the writers the salient points and the terminology. But
Okay.
the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, ISU, and they change names all the time. Investigative Service Unit, Behavioral Analysis Unit. They didn't have a plane, so it wasn't like someone called you and go, "All right, we'll come out and take a look at the crime scene." By the time the guys in the unit got a chance to look at the crime scene, it could be 2 years later. It could
Okay.
be 3 years later. And you're looking at it from just a historical perspective. That's why it's so important for police officers when they go out and they examine a crime scene, you get one shot at it.
Right.
And you need to
Right.
realize that because, a lot of these cases, they don't all get solved, they go cold. And when you leave, someone else comes in and you want to be able to give them a good starting point.
Absolutely. So, how exact of a science is it?
It's more of an art than it is a science.
Okay. Can you
You look
explain
at
that?
that. Yeah, there's some science to it when you get into the forensics, when you get into behavior. I mean, look, Robert Ressler, John Douglas went into all of these prisons all over the place, and he interviewed these killers, and he interviewed these rapists, and these horrible, horrible criminals about what they did and why they did what they did. And they asked them a series of questions, and based on those questions, they were able to develop profiles because a lot of the information is similar. Like, for instance, serial killers fantasize about killing someone before they kill them. And a lot of times the fantasy doesn't live up to the reality. So what do? They continue to try and reach that pinnacle, that fantasy point,
Mm.
much like a drug user. Let's use crack cocaine. They take that first high and it's unbelievable. And
Right.
then they try and chase that first high, but they never get back to that first high again. And that happens with a lot of these individuals. They eventually wind up making mistakes.
Okay. Now, that's very interesting to me. There are those out there who dismiss profiling. They say, it's voodoo, whatever, blah, blah, blah. What do you say to those people?
Huh. Like I said, don't if you haven't tried it, don't mock it. And a lot of those guys, I remember, I'm transferred to Philly in '91, and I'm sitting on the bank robbery squad, violent crime squad. And I remember in '92, the supervisor comes to me and he says, "Hey, Ray, you're the new guy in the squad." He goes, "I hate to do this to you, but we got to send you down. We got to send someone down to the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime for some training. They think this profiling stuff is the future." And
Wow.
I says, really? I says, okay. I says, "I'll take one for the team, but you owe me one." And he had no idea that I was like, "I'll go. You don't even need to ask me. I'll go." And I went down and I spent 2 weeks down there going through training, the basic school, and then I went down for another couple weeks to the advanced school, and then did some TDYs down there, working cases with the guys in the unit.
Now, when it comes to profiles and, criminal behavior, it it's hard to pigeonhole. I mean, well, maybe it isn't. It's like, okay, school shooters. That's one thing, obviously, that's very public. That's very, like shocking. And then they try it as like, well, of course, it's going to be a white male, that's 16 years old that plays video games 3.5 hours a day and wears long black trench coats and hates their mother and doesn't have a father. And I mean, how, like, just using that as an example, or as a criminal behaviorist or a profiler, what would you do with something like that?
Well, first of all, there's no profile of an active shooter.
Okay.
I can tell you that right off the bat. Most of those things start out as a grievance. There's a pathway to violence, and that pathway to violence is across all violent crime. And it starts as a grievance, and we're not getting into a whole lot of detail. It starts as a grievance, moves into an ideation, then it moves into some research, and then they start preparing. Then they do that. Then they go to the point where it's the breach. Just before, that's usually the point of no return, and then they have the attack phase. And then once they get to that phase, they never go back. But there really is no profile of an active shooter because every situation is different based on that grievance.
Interesting. It, it's, I'm trying to find the right words for this. You just see like this disgruntled teenager, but there's so many disgruntled teenagers. It's a confusing time in every kid's life, And and for a lot of kids, they grow up under very, difficult circumstances, and a very small percentage, become criminals and do all this horrific stuff.
My personal opinion is that this younger generation is over medicated. There's a lot of mental illness out there with these kids that's not being addressed by the parents because they think that if they address it, it's a reflection on them, and they don't understand that it's hurting their children.
Yeah,
And these kids need help.
we've never been more medicated and more screwed up at the same time.
How about
Yeah,
that?
I will use the caveat that, for 25 years of working on the streets in a big city as a cop, yes, there are people that should be heavily medicated, that it would do them a world of good that aren't, or they're mixing it with, street drugs or alcohol, or, or they're just not taking the medicine that's prescribed to them. But then the flip side of the coin is, I think, it's like instead of going after the root cause of what's causing these, this grief or this depression or this anxiety or whatever. It's like, oh, here's a pill, here's a pill, here's a pill. And they think it's just going to cure everything. And like you said, I think it's just causing more monstrous behavior.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, we could definitely go down that rabbit hole, but we're not gonna today. I want to talk about bank robberies. Yeah, that's a big part of your book, obviously. What's the most common types? I I had my eyes opened when I went day shift after working nights for 17 years. So I never responded to a bank robbery or a pharmacy robbery. Those were like the two biggies. Then all of a sudden I'm like, holy cow, we're getting hit, and it's just me at least one, two, three, four times a month, maybe more. And that's just me as a sergeant responding to these things.
Imagine working in LA, Pat, where
Oh,
there's 2,000 bank robberies a year, where
2000.
2,000 where they have to break it up into four different squads to take four different sections of the city.
Oh
You have
my
to look at
God.
Philadelphia in the early 90s. There were close to 400 robberies just in the city. So I remember going to two, three a day. If we got a day that we didn't have a bank robbery, we celebrated.
Oh my
And
gosh.
on top of that, there were armored car robberies.
See,
So you
yeah,
had
I never had that. Never had an armored car
26
robbery.
in one year, 26
Oh,
car robberies in one year. And the investigative time it takes to put those things together. The great thing about it is some of these guys would continue to hit robberies over and over and over again until they got caught, which really helped us. But get back to your question, the most common, I would say, is a demand note.
okay.
And the demand note without a weapon. Because in the federal system, when you rob a bank, that's one charge. When you rob the bank with a gun, that's a separate charge.
Right.
So the first time you rob a bank with a gun, you're looking at a mandatory minimum 7 years just for the gun.
Mm.
Every robbery after that in the federal system is a mandatory 25 years that runs consecutive.
Oh,
So in other words, you're going to do the 7 and the 25. So if you rob five banks all with a gun, your minimum sentence just for the gun is
oh,
107 years. So
oh,
let's
you'll never see daylight.
so demand note, although they come in with the gun, there's usually not a demand note. Although there has been people that come in with a gun and they expose a weapon, but then there's people that come in and have the weapon drawn. Okay, so that's really the second, and then the third type is what we call bank takeovers, where they assault the bank as it opens in the morning, and their purpose of that is to go right to the ball. And those are the most violent individuals. But anybody that robs a bank is violent.
Yeah, again, I was very naive as to the world of bank robberies until I went days, and the overwhelming majority was and it was usually a pillhead or a heroin junkie or or a crack fiend that would come in with a hoodie up and sunglasses, and they'd be like, "Give me money."
Mhm.
Or they would have a note, and sometimes they leave the note, and it's like, well, thanks for your fingerprints. You're not wearing gloves, but okay, that's pretty dumb, but okay, no problem there. Or that I had one where there was a receipt where he went to McDonald's before he robbed the bank. Well, what's at McDonald's? Surveillance cameras everywhere. Yeah, he actually did. I can't tell you how many crimes we solved because of drive-through receipts that you'd find in the car.
We've had ones where they wrote a demand note on the back of their paycheck stub with their name and address on it. I mean,
Oh,
so it's good. There was one guy who was living in the South Detectives. He was homeless. He was living in South Detectives in the Philadelphia Police Department. He was a homeless guy. They let him stay in a stairwell. He went over and robbed the bank and
oh,
then came back. And he was upset because he wanted 3 squares a day and he wanted a warm bed. So that's
oh.
why he robbed the bank. He didn't even go to the teller. He went to the customer service person and he took $20 from her wallet.
Oh my God. You know,
Unbelievable.
yeah, you just scratch your head. I have had it where, they start popping rounds off right away.
Yeah,
And, that's a totally different beast. And it was very unusual for the FBI to show up to any of these in Milwaukee.
really.
Yes. Oh, almost never. Unless it was violent, you would never see an FBI agent.
We responded in Philadelphia to every single robbery.
Wow.
But
That's,
I know in the Baltimore office, out of the Wilmington RA, they very rarely responded to bank robbery. So it all depends. But our relationship with the Philadelphia Police Department was second to none.
okay.
Actually, there were two detectives from major crimes who worked all the major violent crimes on our squad. So they would respond to bank robberies with us. So it was a team effort that helped us. We had to do something. I
Yeah.
mean, we had 400 robberies in a year. You got to do something.
That's more than every day.
Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
God. Now, thinking back on your career with the armed robberies, what was one that really stuck out in your head? And we will talk about, your book, but like kind of an unusual or funny-ish kind of bank robbery.
Oh man, there's so many of them.
That you guys just kind of scratch your head like, oh, that was
Well,
dumb, or well,
it
why'd you
was
do that?
the best one was an individual that I arrested, and we caught him red-handed, and he went up to prison. He had AIDS, and the federal judge felt sorry for him, so he gave him a shorter sentence, 6 years.
Okay.
He robbed 3 banks, all by note, no weapon. So he gave him 6 years, figuring he may not live that long anyways.
Right.
He gets out because he has to do 85% of his sentence. He gets out a little over 5 years, and he takes from out in Western Pennsylvania. He takes a bus, and he gets off in Center City, Philadelphia. He gets off the bus, and he walks into a bank, and he robs it.
Come on.
Swear to God, he comes
Oh,
out of the bank. The dye pack explodes, so it's all over him, and
right.
he runs right into a cop.
Oh,
So that guy didn't have any luck at all. But I mean,
no.
you can't make that stuff up. You just can't make it up.
No, you can't. I had two funny ones where one, I call of a bank robbery. I'm hauling ass, getting there because it was supposed to be in progress. I see a guy walking down the sidewalk, walking with a bag, and he's covered in dye. And he's walking, he sees me, I see him, I slam on the brakes, and he says, "Why are you stopping me?" And he's literally covered in the dye. I'm like, I don't know, I just thought I'd talk to you, blah blah blah. He gave up right away, there was nothing climactic about it. Then we had another one where it was in Bayview, which was kind of like this eclectic hipster kind of cool place to live. And we had violent crime there, but not a ton. It was a bank robbery at noon, and I'm like, oh geez, okay. It was a demand note. The guy didn't wear any kind of disguise. I'm looking at the video, and I'm like, this guy like put zero effort into disguising himself. I mean, just an average dude. He didn't even put on sunglasses. He didn't nothing. Then the next day at noon, we get a call for a bank robbery, same exact place, and they give a description of the guy. And I was like, holy shit. So my coppers got there before me, and they're like, there's they advised me before I get there, like, yeah, subject in custody. I'm like, well, that's unusual. That doesn't happen every day. he robbed the bank, and then he came back the next day, and he didn't rob them. He just sat in the lobby in a chair, and he says, "I'm here. Come get me." And I'm like, so I look at him and I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "I owed the dope man $5,000. He said they were going to kill my family." He says, "I know you're going to get me." He says, "I'm at the end of my rope. I'm done." And then it's kind of sad, and you're just like, wow, you're to that point in your life.
Yes, but maybe you need to get down that low before you can get up and start going right.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God,
Maybe, well, look, maybe you saved his life.
You know what? Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully you did.
So let's get into the meat and potatoes here. The Friday night bank robber, Carl Gugasian. How do you pronounce his last name?
Gugasian.
Gugasian.
Hmm?
Okay. When and how did you first become aware of him and start working the case? Thanks everyone for joining me and Professor, author, and retired FBI agent Raymond Carr. We are just getting started with stories of bank robbers and other criminals. Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion of this conversation next Sunday, when we will dissect the case of the Friday night bank robber who pulled 50 heists and was on the lam for 30 years, until Ray caught him. You're not going to want to miss this one. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Cops and Writers podcast. If you haven't done so yet, could you take a minute and rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? If you have already, thank you. As always, thank you for all of your support, and, of course, let's be careful out there.